If you're new here, I talk about understanding oneself and interesting different theories about psychology and the Bible and Kabbalah and the universe and generations and history and all that fun stuff. Overall, to try to understand everything, put everything into context. Well, yesterday was Yom Kippur. In Judaism, that's the most holy day in the Jewish calendar. It actually begins with Rosh Hashanah, which is 9 days prior, and then Yom Kippur is the 10th day, and those are the holy days, the highest holy days in the Jewish calendar. It's a time of reflection. It it's a time of the new year. However, it's not the new year specifically biblically. It's because Jews use the Babylonian calendar, they use the Babylonian months. So Rosh Hashanah literally means head, Rosh, Resh, head of Ha, meaning the, Shana, year, Rosh Hashanah. Uh, so it's a time of reflecting on the past. In fact, the previous month, Elul, is a time of reflection. Um, Cleaning, I suppose, cleaning up, doing house cleaning, psychologically and mentally and emotionally and life-wise, on where you've been. And the Rosh Hashanah, there's a phrase of opening the gates. There's a forthcoming new year. You're encouraged to eat sweets. I ate some Oreos with mint frosting inside. Uh, Traditionally, people eat apples and honey and apricots and so on, something sweet. And for 9 days, it's like that. People wish each other to have a happy new year. More specifically, there's a phrase, I can't remember the tika te lishana tika tevu. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's been a while since I've been in a Jewish community, interacting in a Jewish community. But it means, may you be inscribed in the book of life for a good forthcoming year. The metaphysical, the symbolism behind that is that um, your forthcoming life is inscribed in a book, a divine book, what will happen to you for the forthcoming year. And so the wish is that you be inscribed for a good year. Anyway, it's not that Jews literally believe that, but it's a symbolic thought. There's a lot of symbolism in Judaism. It's not so literal, and this is a topic for another discussion. But it's Judaism is very different from Christianity. Like the entire lifestyle is different from Christianity. It's not so literal. It's not bent on preaching. I can go on and on about that, but that's one reason why I feel very welcomed. I feel very glad that I was born a Jew by fact of my mother being Jewish. My dad was Catholic, Irish Catholic. Anyway, all right. I bring up Yom Kippur not just because I just celebrated it yesterday, but because, and we fast, by the way, during Yom Kippur, the 10th day. But because it's a time of reflection. So sometime back, maybe a couple weeks ago, I wrote this, and I took an online test, and I wrote some stuff here, and it's a reflection on who I am, different theories that I know about and I try to apply to myself. And I thought, it's not just about me talking about myself. I'm using myself as an example to talk about these different aspects and psychological principles and psychological theories that may enlighten you on your journey to understanding yourself better. But this time I wanted to do something special. So I categorized these different theories into two categories. One is what I think of as the more innate qualities you seem to be born with, and the other is um, experiences. So in some sense, it's nature versus nurture. One category is nature, meaning you're born with these traits inherently. Maybe a lot of them are inherited genetically, and the other is nurture, meaning experiences you've had and where you've been placed in the world at the time you've been placed and grow up. So, keeping in mind, I have those two categories. The first and primary theory I wanted to talk about is Myers-Briggs personality types. There are 16 of them, and I haven't formally taken the test. It's expensive, but I just looked at the 16 different personality types. I believe the website is 16personalities.com. And I found, at first I thought I was an INFP because I seem to be introverted, tend towards being introverted, but it seemed very clear. Instead of that, I believe I am an ENFP. So let me go make an overview of the different theories I will be presenting. And then I'll go into the first one soon. So there's the 16 personality types. I think I'm an ENFP. We'll talk about that. And then AGP, autogynephilia, I believe plays a part, certainly a part in my personality. Then we get to this little bit here, which I will talk about in terms of AGP. Something by David G. Mirich, M-I-R-I-C-H, PhD in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, talking about higher intelligence relating to the more the higher propensity one has towards autogynephilia, which I thought was very interesting because this is something certainly almost genetic. Both my parents were Mensa members, and my mom's brother was a Mensa member, and for all I know, my cousins may be Mensa members or qualify. I have not taken the test because, number one, I don't know what will really get me. In terms of networking, I network with smart people, and some of whom are Mensa members, so I don't know what more benefit I would have in taking the test. And two, I'm scared that I wouldn't qualify. And three, I'm not really that good at taking tests sometimes. I guess it depends on the test. Three, actually, I don't know, like achievement-wise, I don't know. Would it get me a better job? Would it get me a better career? What would it get me, even if it said I did qualify? I would still be, I would know already that I'm smart. I don't need a test to tell me I'm smart. As I said before, I'm born from two very smart people and so forth. Smart's intelligence runs in my family, so I don't really know what a test would benefit, taking a test would benefit me for. All right, then, so there's the ENFP, there's the AGP, and I mentioned that. Then we get to the nurture aspect. There's having been born into a nomad archetype, generational archetype. Now, I knew I should have written these down. If you look online, there's a theory of 4 repeating generational archetypes, and they go through a cycle of 4, and then they repeat and go through a cycle of 4 through history. And the 4 archetypes are, this is by 2 authors, one of whom is deceased. Prophet, nomad, hero, and artist. Then the next generation is prophet, nomad, hero, artist. The actual nicknames that society ascribes to each generation is not that nomad archetype, nomad artist, prophet, whatever. It's um, it's their own individual um, nicknames. However, the nicknames and their values reflect tend to reflect, according to this theory, uh, those for archetypes. So, so I'm Gen X. I'm towards the end of Gen X. So I am a nomad, part of the nomad generation archetype, and, which means that I'll get into further into this, but basically, I grew up with lockheed, parents are away, you fend for yourself, you grow up fast, and so forth. I'll get into that. So you can tell how that's more of an experiential thing in life, but it does impress upon you certain values about life. So that's more the nurture. Then cosplay, that would go along, I guess, with AGP. Um, Depends on how you express it. I'm Jewish. If I were I to be born, to be more grammatically correct, were I to be born in a different culture, I would not have been Jewish. But I was born as a Jew, so I have certain Jewish values. And the interesting question is, which ones do I have inherently, and which ones were indoctrinated on me? Which one? Now, I feel very comfortable being Jewish. I feel it is also the right path for me. Um, my own beliefs match what the Jewish beliefs, and the Jewish, not just the Jewish beliefs, that sounds too Christian, the Jewish lifestyle. So I feel very comfortable. I feel very glad and proud that I am and comfortable as a Jew. But I can't deny that it is a nurturing thing. In other words, I was born into the culture and grew up as a Jew. It's not probably not something in my mind or in my brain, not something genetic. Although it's interesting. Jews have tended, now of course there's a lot of intermarriage, or there's more intermarriage than there had been amongst Jews. Um, what genetic traits go through Jewish families? They, in the past, they were very, I was about to say secluded. There was an emphasis on marrying only, staying within the community, and Jew marries Jew. Um, Unfortunately, I'm far from a city that has a large Jewish population. Um, my life would have been very different had I been in New York City or Los Angeles or somewhere larger where I would have been able to find someone Jewish. But that's another story. Um, but um, Jews have, I don't know about other, there are several different ethnic groups of Jews, depending on where you're born geographically. Um, Ashkenazi, glad I remember that. There's Ashkenazi, there's Mizrahi. Ashkenazi is primarily German. That's why you see a lot of Jews with last names that are German. Um, there's Sephardic, which is kind of Spanish, French. And that's interestingly where Kabbalah sprang out from, Sephardic, according to what I've read. There's Mizrahi, there's Ashkenazi, there's Sephardic, and there's Falashas, which would be in Africa, if I remember correctly, in Africa. And then there are smaller groups. It's questionable whether they were missionized by Christians and then became Jews or what. But those are the four primary Jewish cultural groups. But anyway, Ashkenazi Jews There have been studies that Ashkenazi Jews tend to be very smart, smarter than the average population. Um, and there's I don't remember the statistics, but actually, I believe I wrote them down here. But anyway, there's a higher percentage of Jews who have, amongst the Nobel Prize winners, there's a higher percentage of them that are Jews. So then there's my experience being a Star Trek fan and being exposed to Star Trek and so forth, and that reinforced my own beliefs about life. And a perfectionist, I put down here, possibly perfectionist writer. Going back to the ENFP, that's where the artistry in me lies. However, through experience, I believe the perfectionist aspect in me as a writer kicked in, and that's more the nurture. In other words, I had been a writer. My proclivity is to be a writer and to express my ideas. That's from the ENFP personality type, Myers-Briggs. However, the experience writing the Madonna screenplay and experiences since then, I think, impacted on me in terms of being a perfectionist in my writing. Okay, so let me go on to first one, ENFP. Debating whether to split this up into different videos, but all right, here we go. It's 5 to 7% of the population. It's the ENFP personality type is the 5th most popular amongst women. They're known as the campaigner. I think I'm a subtype A, which would tend to be more confident, more emotional control in relationships. So I have a list of traits. All right. Bring every ounce of vibrant energy to romantic relationships. True free spirit, independent, outgoing, infectious enthusiasm, radiate positive energy, focused on the future, open-hearted, excellent communicators, open-minded, sparkling imagination, belief in things that can't always be explained rationally, and that may relate to my interest in the occult. Not necessarily that I believe in the occult, but just a fascination over what people believe, and just almost artistically different imaginative ideas. Want to share with anyone who will, and supernatural, of course, and UFOs and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and so forth. When I was a kid, interest in those things, that may come from that. Want to share with anyone who will listen. Lively, upbeat approach to life. Good at seeing things as they could be rather than focusing on what they are. Profound depths that are fueled by intense desire for meaningful emotional connections with others. Deep contemplative introspection. Regularly use natural curiosity and expansive creativity to better understand himself and complex dynamics of human relationships. Rarely hold back when interested in someone romantically. Shower new flame with the person with affection. Live for glimmers of insight they can gain from connections. Skillful at finding patterns and connections between people, situations, and ideas. How we treat others is what truly matters. Want to add value to the world. Love to ask questions. Can struggle with self-discipline and consistency. Losing steam on projects. Now, I would at first glance, first thought, think I don't fit that. However, perhaps there's another aspect of my personality that compensates for this and makes me keep pushing in terms of discipline and sticking with projects. I can sense sometimes, I can see in myself sometimes that I do have an interest in a wide variety of projects that I want to work on. I can see that. Can read too much into others' actions and behaviors. I believe that's caused me problems sometimes in relationships. Uncomfortable with the prospect of being disliked. When failing to win someone over, will lose sleep trying to figure out what to do about it. I certainly see that in myself. Thrill of a new project, especially collaborating with others, can bring out the best. Focus on the big picture and exploring new ideas can focus on the big picture and exploring new ideas can overshadow attention to practical daily matters. Feel called to uplift others. That's that campaigner nickname. Overly accommodating. Inner idealism leaves him with a nagging feeling that some major areas of his life isn't good enough. Some major area of his life isn't good enough. Longing for a life of rich experiences. I certainly have experienced that. Career wise, creativity, nonprofits. These are the different careers that ENFPs tend to be attracted to. Nonprofits, public service, counseling, education, public relations, hospitality, media, entertainment, and scientific and technical fields. I certainly fit sort of with counseling, understanding people and relating to people on a human level, getting to intrigued by how people think and talking. Going good, good, good. Froze for a moment there. Camera froze for a moment. I'm very interested in scientific fields, especially theoretical physics, and understanding the universe. Entertainment, I've wanted to be a screenwriter, and I grew up watching television as a little child. Um, and educating people, media, I think those all fit. Public service, I was also interested in politics. I wanted to run for president, get really involved in politics. Um, Love language, I looked up love language, not to a large degree, but I think of the different types of love languages, I think mine would be physical touch. Um, dislikes dislikes for an ENFP: dishonesty, constraints, injustice, and interruptions. So that concludes that. All right, so some characteristics. Now we're moving on. Well, no, I want to go in order. I did mention that nomad is more of an cultural thing. I'm sticking with the nature aspect. So I think those are intrinsic in my brain. I think somehow, perhaps genetic. And I was also intrigued by possibly how many of those my mom had. So I want to go to a page here. Here we go. I want to go down here. So I made this list here. I called Mom's Encouraged Ethics. I wanted to know which ethics I had and which ethics my mom had ingrained upon me. So for ENFP, I put down curiosity, direct communication, and compassion. And then I wrote down a list of what my mom, as many as I could think of, the ethics that my mom encouraged within me or displayed. Again, she wasn't pushing it on me. She simply clearly abided by these. Number one, respect for others. Number two, acknowledgement of honesty about self and situation. Three, compassion. Four, dignity. Five, physical health. Six, privacy. Seven, knowledge. And then I linked seven, knowledge, with two, acknowledgement of and honesty about self and situation. Because if you must acknowledge your situation and yourself in order to be clear on what you know. Don't cloud it with false beliefs or misidentification. Number 8, trust. 9, diligence. 10, desire for a good life. 11, direct communication / equality between speakers. In other words, when she would relate to somebody, she would relate directly. It wasn't above or below. 12, curiosity. 13, respect for following the system. And I don't mean like a slave. I simply mean she went along. She didn't. There's no urgency to fight. There was no instinctive reaction to fight the system. There's a process like getting a driver's license. You simply go through the process of getting a driver's license. There's a process for voting. You simply go vote. You're a good citizen. So out of those, I wrote down here to the side a list. I went through here, and a lot of those, I'm not sure if I were indoctrinated in these ones that my mom had, these ethics, or whether I was born with them or there was a genetic connection. To the side, I wrote mom, and then I wrote dignity, trust, desire for good life, physical health, diligence, and privacy. I believe it's been a while since I've written this, so I think that's where I was trying to differentiate that from what I have above, which I labeled ENFP, which is curiosity, direct communication, and compassion. I believe I was trying to separate ENFP, my personality type, from mom, dignity, trust, desire for good life, physical health, diligence, and privacy. Those I believe in myself, I adhere to, but those may be ones that were indoctrinated upon me by my mom. It's unclear. All right, then I'll move on to the second topic, the autogynephilia. Now, there's a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding about it, but I believe, looking through my past, that there are characteristics of autogynephilia in me. Literally, love of oneself as a woman. In other words, imagine the joy of imagining myself as a woman. And I'll have to mention my history for a moment. Around the time of puberty, I'll just say, that seemed to kick in. Although there were earlier signs of a fantasy like dressing up before that, but there seemed to be around, I don't want to connect it with puberty, but so I will say around age 9, 10, 11, that's when it seemed to kick in, become stronger and become more focused. So that's around the time of puberty. There's also, I think this is what I later meant by cosplay and so forth, mermaids and contortion, and I seem to want to bond with the object of my attraction. And I'll get into that here. So repeating myself a little bit, literally love of oneself as a woman. Okay, 2, desire to live. These are the common characteristics of an autogynephilic type. Desire to live as a woman often remains as strong or stronger after an initial sexual response to the idea has faded. In other words, you have the sexual response, or as I suspect, it was probably during puberty when it, that kicked in for me. It became more focused, whereas before it was, and not that I did it that many times, but it's like I can remember like maybe a couple of times in like an attraction to Jeannie and fantasizing about Jeannie from My Dream Jeannie and Mary Poppins and so forth. But it seemed to kick in around the time of puberty. So the theory by Ray Blanchard Dr. Blanchard, is that there tends to be an initial connection with during puberty, sexual response, and then over that over time. It remains, and so the sexual response is not the overwhelming or the dominating um, aspect of it. The desire still remains even beyond the sexual response and sexual connection. Um, Erotic target location error. This is a fancy term meaning attraction to women being redirected towards the self instead of others. I like to call it hyper heterosexuality, where, as I said before, I'm attracted to I'm attracted to mermaids. I'm attracted to, well, that's a whole other thing. I'll get into quickly. Fancy, all right, let me rephrase it this way. I seem to be attracted to both embodying, like in myself, wishing that I could myself be um, the example of what I'm attracted to. Um, it's interesting. Why mermaids? Why contortion? Well, I think in contortion there's a sexual component clearly, but I think in both of those instances it's um, defying what's common, normal, what's expected, what's unusual, and I think that links back to the ENFP type, curiosity and imagination. Um, I think like bending physics, bending normality, and I think that relates to UFOs and Bigfoot and being interested in those topics and the occult, supernatural, being fascinated by um, what's beyond the natural. Um, so I think, and of course, mermaids are half fish, half human woman. Um, so it. I think there's something to that. It's beyond natural. It's something, you get what I mean. I've said it so expressed in so many ways. So I think that links why mermaids. One reason why perhaps I was attracted to mermaids, and then within myself, I want to embody that which I'm attracted to. Same thing with contortionists, and same thing with women, particularly visually attractive women. Um, I think there's a target, what's called an erotic target location error. In other words, it's outward plus it also reverses in, and you want to embody. You want to take on the characteristics because you enjoy it so much. You're so much attracted to it that you want to embody it. You want to. I think it's probably because you enjoy it, so you're attracted to it so much you want to absorb as much of it as possible. Seek clinical treatment. So AGPs tend to seek clinical treatment to change sex later in life, mid 30s or later, and there are different possibilities for this. I can only say in my case, I hadn't seriously thought about it until I'm now 48, I'll be 49 become 49 next month. I haven't married, so there's no other person in my life who would be affected by it. My fertility would be lower, chances of having a kid, and if the kid grows up, then I would be far older when the kid matures, grows up to be like 18. I'd be far older than other parents. Um, so were I to consider sex change earlier, or under different circumstances, it would be I'd run into problems. So perhaps perhaps that's a reason why many do wait until later on in life to consider sex change. That is now Dr. Blanchard identified two types of like trans people. One overwhelming over the one part of the population is much larger, seems to be much larger than the other part. the AGP seems to be much larger than the homosexual part of the population. Um, the um, so the heterosexual AGP tends to seek treatment to change sex later on in life, mid 30s or later. The homosexual realizes it much earlier on. There's less of a desire to change one's sex. They both have um, an inhibition towards coming out publicly. But in the case of homosexual, there's no, at least I'm not homosexual, but from what I understand, there's less of an issue because it's more recognized, I suppose, in society. And it's just man hooks up with man or woman hooks up with woman. There's less of a desire to change sexes. Whereas with autogynephilia, there's a much stronger desire to change sex. So there's that issue, or that aspect. Anne Lawrence, I wrote down her name, but I didn't write down more credentials. Anne Lawrence, Laurence. It might be W. Wrote down her name beside this. More that AGP heterosexuals are more excited about sex change than homosexuals, happier, and they are happier with new genitals. That's not something I'm planning to do if I were to go through the sex change at all. There is some desire. That's it for AGP. I did take this test. I want to add in here because I thought it was interesting. I want to add in two aspects that David G. Merrick that I mentioned before, and this test that I took. And of course, one test online should not be indicative of an entire thing, but I thought it was interesting here. I'll just mention this again. David G. Merrick, Mirich, PhD in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, 80214 for the zip code. There's an article he wrote. There's a paper he wrote called "What is quote normal." A comparison of the IQ scores and MMPI results of a sample of consensual sadomasochists. Of course, he goes into sadomasochism, blanking on exactly how this relates, but it was printed in the Clinical Neuropsychological, not sure if that's a magazine. It's Clinical Neuropsychological, 2007, and then semicolon 21:400. I wrote that down because someone had described it, or from what I found online, he found that if I'm characterizing this correctly, he found that among AGPs, they tend to be higher in intelligence. So I was rather intrigued by that because it matched, if true, it matches my situation where I consider myself smart and intelligent and creative. I think creativity plays a part, and imagination, the ability to visualize, plays a part in AGP. Men tend to be more visually oriented in terms of attraction, I think. At least that's a stereotype. Right, so then I go on to this test. I hope I wrote down, oh yes, globalleadershipfoundation.com, and it's testing EQ and IQ. Actually, EQ and what it called, I think, statistical ability, whether you are more inclined to be emotional, deal with things emotionally or deal with things statistically. What I was intrigued by was that I had grown up My mom, as I'd grown up, my mom told me that I'm unusual in that I have both high emotion quotient, and an intellectual quotient, meaning there's IQ, which is what I like to say raw data, or the ability to figure things out logically. I don't want to say logically, the ability to figure things out, and emotion quotient, which is the ability to understand people and notice people, notice how people are feeling, and so forth. So I wanted to go online because I'm doing this. It's an important part of my overall personality and everybody's overall personality. How high is their EQ? We talk about IQs and so forth. What are people's EQs? So I took a test. There are 60, I believe, 60 questions. Yeah, 60 for each. So there are 60 for EQ that you go through, and then there's 60 for IQ. Well, I don't want to say IQ. 60 for whatever the other thing is, statistical something or other, that you go through. And SQ, yeah, statistic quotient. EQ, emotion quotient, SQ, statistic quotient. And for each question, you write down how strong you are, how strongly you agree or disagree. It's one of those things where there's a sentence and you, I think there are 4 categories. Do you agree with it, strongly agree with it, disagree with it, strongly disagree with it? And then certain ones of those, for certain ones of those, you count up how many strongly agrees and simply agrees and add them together. And same thing with the, for EQ, same thing with the SQ. So I don't know how well you can read that. Those are the numbers. Okay, so for EQ total, I got 64, and for SQ, I got 39. So, and I was doing this blindly. So, it said female brain, which I don't really, that's a little biased. How I interpret that is simply that according to this test anyway, I tend to have a higher emotion quotient than I do statistical quotient, which is simply, I think, maybe related to me simply being an ENFP type. But it did give me a little bit of confidence or backing that I do have a high emotion quotient. Don't say that 5 times fast. So then I want to talk about nomads. I definitely wrote something about nomads here. Now, as I said before, that's one of the 4 generational archetypes. They go in sequence and then they repeat back again through history. It's called, when you go through all 4 archetypes, that's called a cycle, and then there's another cycle, another cycle, another cycle, as the 4 generational archetype pattern repeats itself, the sequence repeats itself. So also what I like about this theory is that, and I've done another video somewhere on my channel more about this, but briefly said, what I like about this theory is that there are 4 time periods over the course of that whole cycle, each generation, the 4 generations, over that whole cycle, each generation goes into the next section of life. So it's childhood, I think childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and elderhood. And as they progress, simultaneously, the other generations are also progressing. So it's like each generation grows to the next, advances to the next level age-wise. So they both impact on society with their own values, intrinsic, idiosyncratic with which generational archetype they are, but also they're also impacted upon by what the outside forces in the society. So I am a nomad. I would fit into the nomad generation, Generation X. Values liberty, survival, honor. Um, Born during spiritual awakening in the country, and again, that's a certain period of time during when one of the generations was dominant. I think it's the prophet generation was dominating. Growing up as underprotected children, meaning there's a term latchkey kid, and that's what I meant earlier. I said loose key or something, latchkey. It's latchkey kid, where you're just accustomed to moving around as you please, and parents are working away, outside of the home. There's no mother to come home to. Likely, they fend for themselves, and they're used to having a key to get in and out of the house. At a young age, they may be taking buses at a young age, something like that. Growing up and having responsibilities. Coming of age as alienated young adults, and then they mellow into pragmatic midlife leaders as they get older, as they go into that next sequence of life, or period of life. They mellow into pragmatic midlife leaders during historical crisis in the country, and they age into tough post-crisis elders. Now, I don't want to say only, but I wrote down a few of the famous people in history who would fit this nomad archetype. In other words, which generation they were born into. George Washington, Harry Truman, Grover Cleveland, Ulysses Grant, and John Adams. And certainly when I read this, when I came upon this theory, that gave me a whole new perspective, possibly if this theory is true, sociological theory is true, a whole new insight into how to perceive these people like George Washington and John Adams. They're not just historical figures. It gave me perspective on recognizing that Benjamin Franklin was of an earlier generation than George Washington. He would have been a prophet, and George Washington was born as a nomad, and Jefferson was born as a hero. So they're not, it's not like they're all collectively our founding fathers or something. There were different generations, and they experienced life differently, and therefore they were growing up imbued with values because of when they were growing up. And that stuck with them through their lives. In other words, Thomas Jefferson may have disagreed with George Washington, even more so probably with Benjamin Franklin, simply because he was born a couple of generations later than Benjamin Franklin. So this video has certainly taken up some time, but I thought this was interesting to go through. I also have, being born Jewish, Star Trek fan, and possibly perfectionist writer, to cover. Those are the other nurturing aspects of other aspects of my experience on Earth, living in memory. My memories. Our personality is made up of our memories, very much so our memories. It reminds me of, and I'm trying to think of the name of the anime series. There are several movies about memory. One of my favorite authors that I actually haven't really read, I've read one short story, but I like to read, in addition to H.P. Lovecraft, I would like to read more about more works by Philip K. Dick, because I think he is up my alley in terms of what I'm fascinated with. Some of his stories have become famous movies. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep became a movie called Blade Runner, and there was a sequel to Blade Runner 2049. I read a story, if I as I recall, it's by Philip K. Dick, about two soldiers. Each soldier is from an opposing species, and they become modified to resemble the other species, and it's interesting. Somehow I remember something about them being blobs at one point, like turn into a blob form. But anyway, it's an interesting idea. But anyway, then Minority Report was one of his, and we can remember it for you wholesale became the movie Total Recall, and then that movie was remade. The first one was with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then there was a second making of the movie, but it came from Philip K. Dick, and there are a number of other movies based on these stories, and so I in his stories, memories and identity play a huge part. Aside from that, there was an anime series I'm blanking on the name of, but it became an animated movie, and then there was a sequel animated movie, and then there may have been a animated series based on the movie, and then they made a live action movie with Scarlett Johansson. Maybe some of you are remembering what movie this is. Basically, it's in a future time when humans have been able to adapt themselves, become cyborgs, and there's some secrets, and there's a conspiracy in there somewhere. It's a fascinating story, but I'm blanking on the name of it. The only name I can think of is Evangeline or something, but it's not that. In fact, I have the movie somewhere. I can't remember. Anyway, so I'm interested in personality. What makes up a personality? What determines how you will react? There's an interesting, this is a little bit of a tangential side note, but I was talking with somebody and he didn't seem to catch on to what I was talking about, but I might as well talk about it here because it deals with some aspect of the brain. And I was reading a book called Supernatural by Graham Hancock. He said that ayahuasca and DMT, and I can't remember what there's a long scientific name for this chemical, dimet something or other, that it induces it induces in people who have taken it, have been exposed to it, a feeling of a presence, sometimes a divine presence. I wanted to make a separate video about this. Divine presence or an otherness, other entity being near them. And sometimes they see stick figures. Sometimes, according to the book, the Supernatural book, with the title Supernatural by Graham Hancock, there are sometimes stick figures. There are sometimes visualized. Sometimes they're these entities want to impart, they're very eager to impart information to the person exposed under the exposure of ayahuasca or DMT. Alongside that, there's somebody named Dr. Michael Persinger who developed what's nicknamed a God helmet that you can be put over one, and it stimulates certain parts of the brain, and you get the same feeling. You get these same thoughts and sensations. I have been more interested in the past year or so with neurology. I've always been fascinated by neurology because of this, wanting to understand personality and understand what makes people's minds tick and why they do certain things versus other things. How much can you remove before someone is simply just an indecisive thing, that just a bunch of goo that just sits there. So this God helmet. So neurology. I found, it's in the notes here somewhere. I wrote it down. These certain aspects. I think the temporal lobe was one of them. certain aspects of areas of the brain that, when stimulated, um, gave this feeling of, I think there's euphoria in it, but a feeling of divine presence and spirituality. Um, I'm curious about that. For one thing, in terms of human evolution, but now I'm aside from human evolution, I'm just fascinated now over how it has impacted people, how they think. And I don't want to poo-poo it because it deals with spirituality, and I don't want to use that as an excuse to say that religion is or belief systems are bogus and stupid and pointless, because I quite the opposite. Um, because as a Jew, I believe that, well, Jewish lifestyle is not so literal. It's symbolic. It's very philosophical. There's a lot of metaphor in Judaism that you don't find in Christianity, and I don't have any experience with Islam, so, and the other cultures. Maybe Eastern religions are closer to Judaism, but anyway, I don't know. But I was fascinated by that, and also in terms of terms of my interest in alien abductions and UFOs and so forth. What aspect of that has played a part in, how much of that has played a part in alien abductions, stories about alien abduction. I don't want to say alien abductions, I mean stories about alien abductions, this feeling of an other entity somewhere. And when I shared this with somebody, I was really interested, and he didn't seem to catch on to what I was talking about. There's another interesting aspect of how people think. Despite me talking about Helmet and Dr. Persinger and stimulating areas of the brain, I think it seemed the moment I talked about entity, he asked, what entity is this? Completely missing the point. I'm not talking about a specific entity. I don't mean that there's evidence, this is evidence for a God. I simply meant that it's interesting that there's been scientific research and results showing that when you stimulate, I think, the temporal lobe and there are other parts in the brain, it generates the feeling of a presence nearby. And how much does that connect with consciousness, so forth. So anyway, I'll talk about that in other videos, hopefully. I've talked very long, and if you like my video, I'll conclude it here. If you enjoy topics like this, and I've certainly talked about theories, more about this, continue watching my channel, please, and spread the word around. Visionary ventures. I hope to grow this channel. I hope to talk about UFO cases and present alternative explanations, possible explanations to, for example, the Betty and Barney Hill case. I think what they saw was it was a matter of several factors. It was an alien abduction case, a beacon on a mountain, and I think there was cultural contamination from what she read, and dreams, and taking dreams too literally, and so forth. I think it was a combination of all that, and then I suspect that led to the Travis Walton case, and so forth, and it grew. That's one aspect I want to talk about: alien abduction phenomenon, cultural phenomenon. And I want to talk about Roswell and so forth. So I'll leave that for another time. Anyway, spread the word, and I'll talk with you next time. Bye.